Here's your report.
Thanks, Jane. I wish I could hire a whole team of yous.
Try posting a job on LinkedIn. It's the world's largest professional network. Unlike resumes, LinkedIn gives a real-time view into a candidate's skills, experiences, and more.
Let's do it. You're irreplaceable, Jane, but another you would be great.
Find your perfect match with LinkedIn. Post your free job at linkedin.com/achieve. That's linkedin.com/achieve. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello, it's Dave.
And Mel.
We have an easy favor we want to ask you. You're probably used to being asked to rate and review podcasts whenever you're listening to your favorite show. And for those of you who are awesome podcast listeners rather than podcast makers, you might have no idea what a huge difference those things make.
A big factor in helping people find new to them podcasts on almost all listening platforms is the number of ratings and subscriptions a show has. So if you're one of our dedicated listeners,
hello, and thank you so much for listening.
So much. If you're a dedicated listener and you're not currently driving your car, can you please just look down at your phone right now and hit subscribe and 5-star rating? Both of those things are on the homepage of the show, and both only take a single click.
A few little clicks is all it takes to make us happy and grateful.
We are so easy.
Your ratings and subscriptions make such a difference to our show's potential to keep going. So thank you. And now, on to the show.
Hello. Welcome to Strong Sense of Place.
In each episode, we focus on one destination and discuss what makes it different than any other place on Earth.
Then we recommend 5 books we love that took us there on the page.
I'm Melissa Jolan.
I'm David Humphreys.
We're going around the world, one great read at a time.
Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to Strong Sense of Place. Today we get curious about Panama. In Two Truths and a Lie, we will talk about the Google search that brought down a con man. And then we'll talk about 5 books we love.
I'm recommending a story set in the jungle that features harpy eagles and one of the world's most venomous snakes.
I've got a really well-written swashbuckler of a tale, pirates and princesses and bounty hunters, and it's true. But first, Mel's going to bring us up to speed with the Panama 101.
Let's get oriented. Panama is in Central America. It's around the same size as the state of North Carolina or the Czech Republic.
Oh.
But it's long and narrow. It kind of looks like an S lying on its side, stretched out in the sun, a little bit like a snake.
Yeah, it goes a lot more east-west than I had originally thought.
At its narrowest point, Panama is just 37 miles or 60 kilometers across.
Boy, is this going to be important later.
The S is lying on its side between the Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean Sea. And because of that unique position, you could stand on top of Panama's highest mountain. It's a volcano called Volcán Barú.
Yep.
From the top, you could watch the sun rise over both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans.
Whoa.
I know.
That's hard to think about.
To get there, you have to take one of the world's toughest hikes.
Okay.
Most people start at 11 p.m.
Whoa.
and hike about 6 hours through the night, so they reach the top by sunrise.
Wow.
There are some pretty amazing videos. I'll include them in show notes. People with, headlamps walking through the jungle in pitch black night.
While reading for this, I read a lot of experts recommending that you do not maybe ever go into the jungle, and certainly not at night.
I mean, that just seems like common sense, but here we are. Volcán Barú is also home to the best and most expensive coffee in the world. So I guess you could have an awesome cappuccino after doing that hike.
Okay.
Or sit in a cafe and have a nice cappuccino, one or the other.
Just enjoy the sun rising over one of the 2 oceans.
Yeah. The capital of Panama is Panama City. It sits in the bottom curve of the S on the Pacific side. According to the Rough Guide to Panama, it's Central America's most ebullient capital.
Ebullient?
Yeah, it's so cheerful.
That's a strong SAT word there.
The old town is called Casco Viejo. It has red brick streets lined with beautiful palm trees and white colonial buildings that look like cakes, and a Baroque church with a very shiny golden altar inside.
It sounds really nice.
Along the seafront, you can walk on a stone seawall that's now a nice place to have a seat. But back in the day was a prison and the last defense against pirates.
We'll be talking about pirates later.
First, a little history.
All right.
People have been living in the Panamanian jungles, and I can only assume enjoying the beautiful beaches, for at least 11,000 years. But then, in the 16th century, the Spanish showed up. That little strip of land was a pretty sweet transit point for the gold, silver, and other goodies that the conquistadors needed to take back to Spain. They established Panama City in 1519 and loaded up their galleons with precious cargo. Then the pirates showed up. Do you remember when we talked about Henry Morgan in our Jamaica episode?
I do.
He was the lieutenant governor of Port Royal, Jamaica in 1674. And he was a busy boy because 3 years before that, he gathered up 1,200 of the best privateers, English corsairs, and pirates to attack the Spanish. They started on the Caribbean side of Panama and trekked overland through the jungle. Then they plundered and looted and probably sang yo-ho-ho. And in less than 2 hours, they destroyed the Spanish fleet. 2 hours. There's a very well-reviewed book called The Sack of Panama, if you want to go deep into that swashbuckling story. About 150 years later, Panama broke with Spain and joined forces with Colombia, Ecuador, and Venezuela to form the Republic of Gran Colombia. Then in 1903, with the backing of the United States, Panama split from Colombia and signed a treaty with the U.S. That eventually led to the building of the Panama Canal between 1904 and 1914.
We're going to talk a little bit about the Panama Canal later.
Yes. Panama does seem to attract bossy troublemakers. It's that whole being a land bridge situation. It's great and also attracts trouble. From 1983 until 1989, Manuel Noriega was Panama's de facto ruler.
Yeah.
His regime was defined by fun things like human rights abuses, corruption, and drug trafficking.
Infamous. Until 1989, he ruled over Panama, installing figurehead presidents, assassinating opponents, and serving as an intelligence agent for the CIA and the State Department, while at the same time working for the Cubans, as well as Colombia's largest drug cartel.
He also had a young teen pen pal in Michigan.
What?
Yeah. A girl in Michigan wrote him a letter because she liked his hat. He wrote back, and they started up a relationship that went on for a while. We might cover that in the Library of Lost Time at some point.
I mean, I feel like we're going to have to now. In 1989, the U.S. invaded Panama, arrested Noriega, and tossed him in a U.S. prison. 10 years later, two significant things happened. Panama regained ownership of the canal. So in 1999, they took the canal back.
Yep.
And the country's first woman president was elected. Her name was Maria Moscoso, and she served until 2004. Two other things I want to mention before we move on to why you might want to visit Panama.
All right.
First, the official currency of Panama is the Balboa, but its exchange rate has always been tied to the U.S. dollar.
Yeah.
1 Balboa equals $1. And Panama doesn't print its own paper money. So they use U.S. dollars and Balboa coins.
I wonder if there's any other place in the world that does that. Their own coins, but somebody else's bills.
If anyone knows,
drop a line.
Second, the official language is Spanish. Even though the U.S. has been very present in Panama, only about 14% of the population speaks English. Tourist areas you're covered gets outside of Panama City. It's going to be a lot of pointing and smiling.
Right.
You can make a good impression by saying buenas to everyone you meet. Apparently, even people who don't know each other say buenas when they pass on the street, walk into a shop. It's friendly.
Yeah.
Ebullient, even. Okay, let's talk about stuff you can do in Panama.
Okay.
As you might expect of a Central American country, around half of Panama is covered with rainforests and cloud forests.
Yeah.
If you like animals, There is a lot to love here. The rainforests are home to fluorescent frogs and the Panamanian golden frog, which is bright yellow with black spots and is only about as big as an adult human's thumbnail.
Whoa.
Everyone look at your thumbnail.
And imagine a little tiny yellow and black frog sitting there.
He's smiling at you right now. There are howler monkeys and squirrel monkeys and sloths of both the brown-throated and three-toed variety. There are also 6 species of wildcats, including jaguars and pumas, and more than 1,000 bird species, including the quetzal. That's a bright red and green bird with very long, graceful tail feathers, kind of like Gertrude McFuzz from Dr. Seuss, only elegant. The national bird of Panama is the harpy eagle, and I got a little obsessed.
Did you?
Yes. They're black and white and gray, and they look like a person in a bird suit or the Muppet, Sam the Eagle. Even though they look puppety, they are very fierce. The sloths and the monkeys and other cute, cuddly mammals of the rainforest are not safe when harpy eagles are around, which makes sense.
Yeah.
The eagles are named for the harpies of Greek mythology. Those are half human, half birds that were the spirits of sudden, sharp gusts of wind, which I think is a nod to the fact that when a harpy eagle dive bombs you, you feel that wind coming. They're also quite big. The females can weigh up to 20 pounds. That's 9 kilograms.
That's a good size.
That's bigger than the golden eagles in Mongolia.
Yeah, by like a third. That's a significantly bigger bird.
They have a wingspan of 6.5 feet. It's about 2 meters.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're also monogamous and can mate for life. They live very high up in the rainforest canopy in nests that are about 6 feet across and 1 foot deep.
Wow.
Their nests are like the size of a love seat. They use about 300 sticks to build them. And once they've built it, they use it year after year and remodel it as necessary. I love the idea of an old harpy couple redecorating their nest every season. I'm just going to add a few more seed pods over here and maybe a little bit of possum fur over here. It'll be cozy.
Painting it to keep up with the local Nest Owners Association.
If you're a beach person, Panama is there for you. Every photo of the beach is like palm trees? Check. Soft white sand? Check. Turquoise blue water? Of course. When they were getting photos for Voyager 1 to say this is what a beach looks like, they could have used Panama.
Right.
The crystal clear water is paradise for diving and snorkeling on both sides, Pacific and Caribbean. And there are also prime swells if surfing is your thing, or having a pina colada and watching the surfing. In my research, I found 3 experiences that would merit the label once in a lifetime only in Panama.
Okay.
They go from vaguely adventurous to I'm a full-on explorer now.
So what have you got on the shallow side?
Okay, the first one is a rustic tropical island paradise. If you've always wanted to run away to an almost deserted island, you can stay at a place called Art Lodge. It's a combination art gallery, hostel, and house on Island Gobernadora. The retreat was started by a French artist in 2005, and the island is on the Pacific side of Panama, has about 200 residents. They're mostly fishermen. There are also tropical birds, butterflies, and all kinds of marine life. The website says in bold, "There are no venomous, dangerous animals." And I was like, I wasn't asking that question. Okay.
I think if you've read anything about Panama, you're like, could
better
be.
check.
Yeah, safe than sorry.
As a guest, you can stay in thatch roof bungalows or an open campsite, depending on how brave you are, I guess. There's a really beautiful shared space with a kitchen and dining room and an open-air living room with hammocks and cushions and rugs for just hanging out. There's a strong emphasis on making and enjoying art. And while you're there, you can also go on excursions to go fishing, snorkeling, or walking in a mangrove forest. It all looks pretty idyllic.
That all sounds great.
Second option.
Yep.
Slightly more adventurous. If you love animals and want to make an impact, you can volunteer with Panama Wildlife Conservation to protect jaguars, sea turtles, and other animals.
Whoa.
Yeah. The excursion lasts for a month and costs about $1,200.
All right.
In exchange, you get all of your meals, accommodations, and transport while you work on an animal conservation project in the Cerra Hoya National Park.
Well, that sounds great.
Yeah, you don't need to have previous experience, but the website says that good candidates, quote, need to be practical and content to live in tropical and remote areas. In show notes, I'll share a link to the application form and to videos that show their camera traps. Jaguar camera traps.
Close-ups of the pretty kitties.
Boopable snout.
So what's the most challenging of these trips?
If you want to see what life is like among an indigenous culture, you can stay in a village with the Emberá people.
Wow.
They live in the dense jungle of the Darien rainforest.
What?
Do you want to explain the Darien rainforest?
We're going to talk about the Darien rainforest in depth in a little bit, but it is one of the most inhospitable places on Earth.
Good summary. The Emberá territory has about 12,000 residents who've kept their language and customs alive. You can visit for the day or stay overnight in a village with a population of about 130. To get there, you ride up the river in a dugout canoe, and then there's a communal lunch. After eating, you can buy handicrafts made by the villagers and watch a dance ceremony. And if you're just staying for the day, you say your goodbyes and you get back in the canoe.
Right.
However, if you stay overnight, you get to swim in the river with the kids and then help make dinner. And after hanging out by the fire with the villagers, you sleep in a hut. The huts are raised off the ground with a thatched roof and open sides. It's really beautiful, but that's a lot of nature. I don't imagine that I would sleep a wink in the hut.
No, it sounds really compelling. It's got that hot stove thing where,
There's also an adventure version of that tour, if that wasn't adventure enough.
This is the version where I fight the alligator in the river?
With your bare hands?
Yeah.
The adventure version includes a 3 to 5 hour hike in the jungle.
Oh, whoa. With the locals or on your own?
Yeah, they just like point you in a direction and you go. No, with guides from the village.
You go down there and there's like a big tree, a lot of snakes on it. And then you
Keep your eyes open.
Take a left and then you come back this way.
The village and the tours were featured in the National Geographic documentary show, The Story of Us, which is hosted by Morgan Freeman.
Oh, we saw that.
And there are a bunch of videos from people who've visited that village and other similar ones. I'll put links in show notes in case you're interested. If your ideal vacation involves wearing a bathing suit for days on end and eating fish pulled fresh from the sea, Panama might be your next dream holiday. That's the 101.
He tells two truths and a lie. He hides behind his lying eyes.
Are you ready for two truths and a lie?
Are you ready for two truths and a lie?
Maybe not. I'm about to say 3 statements. 2 of them are true. Mel doesn't know which one is the lie. Here's the first statement. A con man visiting Panama was brought to justice with a Google search of just 3 short words. The second one needs a little context. The average toll for the Panama Canal is currently $54,000. The highest ever paid was just north of $375,000. Here's a statement. The lowest fare ever paid to use the canal was 36 cents. And third, according to scientists, there's a species of sloths in Panama, an entire species, that are drunk 100% of the time.
I just pictured a sloth holding a martini.
So in order, a con man visiting Panama was brought to justice with a Google search of just 3 short words.
I feel like the other 2 are true, so I'm going to say that's the lie.
This is true.
Darn it.
And it's the story of 2 deeply horrible people, John and Anne Darwin. When the story starts, they were husband and wife living in northeast England. He was a prison guard. She ran a business renting what the English call bed sits, which is a room in a building. Typically, renters have a single bedroom and a shared bath. Back in 2000, John was about 50. The Darwins had purchased a couple of houses as an investment. That went poorly, and they were in debt. So John decided to do the only thing that he could think of. He would fake his own death.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only reasonable option there.
Exactly. He's going to fake his own death, and they're going to cash in on the insurance. What could possibly go wrong? So one day in March of 2002, he puts out to sea in a canoe.
From England.
From England, yeah.
Okay.
He ditches the canoe. He gets a ride back to the house, presumably with his wife, Anne. And Anne reports him as missing. There's a search. They find the canoe, but no John Darwin. He's declared dead. She pockets the insurance. It's £250,000, which is about $600,000 now. John lives in one of the bedsits Anne manages. And he even ran into somebody who recognized him and who said, "Hey, aren't you supposed to be dead?"
And he was like, "I'm a ghost."
He said, "Don't tell anybody."
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Master criminals here.
Yes, exactly. So these two criminal masterminds get bored sitting around the house, and they decide they want to go and travel a little. And John applies for a passport. He uses his home address and the name John Jones, and he gets a UK passport with a fake name. And over the next couple of years, they visit Greece and the US, and then they get the idea to go to Panama. And they get to Panama, and they love it. It's so nice. It's really nice. There's the great beach. There's all the animals. It's a big change from Britain. Wouldn't it be great if we could live here all the time? And they get the idea to sell the house back in England and buy a hotel in Panama.
Every step in this story stresses me out so much. I could never make any of the decisions that they made.
Yes, agree. It's a remarkably poor job of risk management. So the hitch here with the Panama hotel idea is that John is not sure that his John Jones passport is going to stand up to Panama's visa laws. They are going to want a birth certificate and medical records and such. So John does the only thing he can think of. And in December of 2007, John Darwin flies back to England, marches into the West End Central Police Station in London, and announces that he has had total amnesia.
Amazing. You almost have to admire the audacity.
He has no memory of what's happened for the last 5 years. And the police contact his wife, Anne, and they drop the news, and she's all, "What? Holy moly guacamole, he's alive? This is awesome. It's a miracle." And the police are all like, "Oh, come on. Really? We got to spend time building a case against these two?" But the final nail in the coffin comes pretty quickly. A newspaper picks up the story, man alive after a 5-year search. Wife has already sold the house and moved to Panama. And some rando in the reading public, bored at work, I'm guessing, types John, Anne, and Panama into Google, and up comes a picture of the two of them together a year earlier talking with a real estate agent in Panama. That image was in the paper the next day. John and Anne were both convicted of fraud, did 6 years, and later divorced.
Aw.
Yeah.
I was hoping it was going to end with them moving to Panama.
It did not. But I also haven't told you what makes them truly horrible people yet.
I mean, that's pretty bad.
It gets worse. When the whole thing started in 2002, John and Anne had 2 grown sons.
No.
Yep.
They did that to their children?
Between 2002 and 2007, those boys thought their father was dead. And Anne never told them.
Oh,
she knew the lie. She saw them often. Later, they testified against her. That is not quality parenting.
That poor family.
Yeah. Let's move on. Statement 2. The lowest fare ever paid to use the canal was 36 cents.
I think the drunk sloth thing might be true. So I'm going to say false.
So I have to tell you about Richard Halliburton. I think you're going to enjoy hearing about him. He was born in Tennessee in 1900. He was a bit of a sickly kid. He spent months in bed because of a rapid heartbeat. He met John Harvey Kellogg, the man behind the cereal, because Halliburton went to Kellogg Sanitarium in Michigan for treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Halliburton was also a smart kid. He was smart enough to get into Princeton, and when he was there, he started to travel a bit. He saw London, he went to Paris. His father was not entirely supportive of his adventures. Dad said that Richard should get the wanderlust out of his system and return to Memphis and adopt a life, quote, with an even tenor. An even tenor didn't sit well with Richard. So he wrote back this quote, "I hate that expression. And as far as I am able, I intend to avoid that condition. When impulse and spontaneity fail to make my way uneven, then I shall sit up nights inventing means of making my life as conglomerate and vivid as possible. And when my time comes to die, I'll be able to die happy, for I will have done and seen and heard and experienced all the joy, pain, and thrills, any emotion that any human ever had, and I'll be especially happy if I am spared a stupid, common death in bed."
Did I just find a new personal hero? That was amazing.
Isn't that great? Halliburton went on to be a travel writer, and not just any travel writer, but a stunt journalist.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. He retraced Ulysses' trip through Greece. He did the same with Cortez and his path through Mexico. He allowed himself to be stranded on an island. He flew around the world in an open cockpit biplane. That took 18 months, and he stopped in 34 countries. On that trip, he took the first aerial photos of Mount Everest. He climbed the Matterhorn and Mount Fuji, and he snuck into the Taj Mahal.
He sounds really fun.
Yeah. Relevant to this episode, in 1928, Halliburton swum the length of the Panama Canal.
Stop it.
Yep. It's a 48-mile swim. He did it in waves. He was protected by a small staff on a boat, including a man with a rifle. The canal official charged him based on his weight and size, like they do with everything else, and they came up with a fee of 36 cents.
So that one was true.
Yeah. In his day, Halliburton became quite famous. He was a solid writer, but he was an even better speaker. He had a high-pitched voice, but he had so much enthusiasm about travel and seeing the world, and he had these fantastic stories. Walter Cronkite heard him speak in the mid-30s and credited Halliburton with steering him into journalism.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. Richard Halliburton was spared a stupid common death in bed. He had an idea to sail a Chinese junk across the Pacific Ocean and arrive in San Francisco for the Golden Gate International Exhibition. He left Hong Kong with a boat and a small crew on March 4th, 1939, and they were never seen again.
Aww, that's so sad.
Yeah.
But also, if he knew that, he would probably be like, right on.
Yeah, did it. Yeah. If you're curious, Halliburton's work is still available, and he's inspired a few biographies. We'll point to them in the show notes. Which leaves our last statement, which we know is a lie. According to scientists, there's a species of sloths in Panama, an entire species, that are drunk 100% of the time. That is a lie. They aren't drunk. They're stoned. There's a species of dwarf sloth that's been marooned off of an island of Panama for the last 9,000 years. The sloths are very cute because they're small. They're about the size of a small cat, maybe.
Oh my gosh, how cute is that?
And there aren't very many of them. They're critically endangered.
Aw.
On that island, the sloths eat nothing but mangrove leaves. And mangrove leaves have a chemical that appears very similar to the chemical that we use for Valium.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So the assumption by some scientists is that these cute little fuzzy creatures are probably baked out of their gourd all the time. While I was doing research for this, I found a sloth expert. Her name is Lucy Cook. She is charming and lovely, and she did a TED Talk about her relationships with the sloths in Panama. We'll put a link in show notes. She also runs an organization she calls the Sloth Appreciation Society.
Cute.
Yeah, you can find her at slothville.com. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. That's Two Truths and a Lie.
Acura's all-new ADX, a compact SUV that isn't just built for one thing, it's precision-crafted for everything. To escape the grind with available all-wheel drive. To go with your flow with available Google built-in.
Hey Google, turn it up.
Okay, turning up the volume. And crafted to be heard with an available Bang & Olufsen premium sound system. The all-new Acura ADX, crafted to match your energy. Acura, precision-crafted performance.
Take your vibes on go, 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 go.
Google is a trademark of Google LLC.
Here's book one.
My first recommendation is Seducing the Spirits by Louise Young. If you've wondered what it would be like to run away to the jungle and you are not ready to commit to visiting the Emberá village, this book is the next best thing.
Okay.
The main character is Jenny. She is a 25-year-old grad student studying songbirds in Panama, but she has made a classic mistake. She had an affair with her supervisor. And now she's been banished to a remote jungle village to gather data on the nesting habits of the harpy eagle.
That sounds like that could be bleak.
Mm-hmm. She's going to be living near, but not with, the indigenous Kuna people.
Oh.
She is going to be on her own in the rainforest. And the only advice her older and supposedly wiser ex-lover/professor has for her, don't tick anyone off. That's it. That's what he gave her before he sent this young girl out into the jungle.
So this is not a death sentence.
No.
Okay.
Spoiler, she does not die.
Okay.
The Kuna community is a real indigenous people. They live on a cluster of small islands off the coast of Panama. They still practice a very traditional lifestyle, subsisting off of the land. Each day, the men leave the island to fish or to work in agriculture on the mainland. And the women stay on the island to tend to the children, and they make these really colorful textiles called mola that they can sell. When I was doing my research on them, I found an article that said they need to start moving off of that island because it is being flooded. They are the first people officially who have to leave their homes because of climate change. Yeah.
Boy, that's rough.
They've never lived on the mainland before. Back to the book.
Yeah, that's really sad, though.
Prior to Jenny's arrival, the bird researchers had all been men. But here's Jenny. She's young, blonde, pretty, and tall. And she towers over the relatively petite Kuna. So as you might expect, they're not really sure what to make of her at first.
Yeah.
And she is way out of her depth. Her job should be pretty simple. She lives in a tent on the mainland. She sits in a blind in the forest, makes notes about the harpy eagle family. And then every Saturday, she paddles 1,200 meters to the Kuna's island because she is required to attend the tribe's community meeting.
How long is she going to do this? Indefinitely.
A while.
Okay.
She does some really ill-advised things.
Yeah.
She gets caught in the jungle after dark. She is terribly ignorant about the animals and the bugs that are her neighbors in the jungle. She almost drowns paddling to the Kuna meeting. And because she doesn't really know how to cook, she subsists mainly on bananas and baked beans eaten cold from the can. It's grim.
Yeah.
This book doesn't have a ton of plot, but the pace is still pretty nice and brisk. There's a kind of a bit of a mystery regarding the harpy eagles, and a visiting missionary stirs up a lot of drama. There's some infighting among the Kuna and lots of flirting and sexual politics. But This is mostly the story of Jenny and the Kuna getting to know each other. She is eventually invited into the community, and we watch as she becomes friends with a handful of characters who are really well drawn, I think. They feel like real people. And she eventually becomes fully immersed in the local way of life. The author, Louise Young, is an anthropologist, and she spent almost 20 years working with the Kuna in Panama. So the details about their language and customs are grounded in her personal experience.
Yeah, she knows what she's talking about.
The bits about the everyday routine were really fascinating to me, like the minutia of how cooking gets done and the relationship between the women and how they interact with each other and what the male-female interactions are like, both the men with their wives and the other women in the village and how they interact with Jenny. This book also made it easy to see how the jungle could be very seductive because it's so beautiful and literally filled with wonder. Like I could see how you would fall in love with it. And the Kuna's everyday life is very connected to the rhythm of the weather and the seasons. There are cute sloths in the trees, and Jenny talks about the sound of bird calls constantly filling the air. And when it stops, you should pay attention to that because it means something is about to happen. There are tiny, tiny translucent frogs and bright blue morpho butterflies that are as big as a basketball player's hand.
Huh.
But danger is always there too.
Yeah.
There are jaguars and snakes called the fer-de-lance. The fer-de-lance is the largest pit viper. It's between 4 and 7 feet long, so about 2 meters. They're brown with black spots and hypnotic golden eyes. And they're known as the 20-breath snake because once they bite, you'll only draw 20 breaths before you die.
That's grim.
I found a short documentary on YouTube called The Deadliest Snake I've Ever Seen. I'll put a link in show notes.
Okay.
Some of this book stressed me out so much. At one point in the story, Jenny realizes that her boots are too stompy in the rainforest, so she decides to go barefoot like the Kuna.
Don't do it. Don't do it, Jenny.
And there are like vivid descriptions of her walking barefoot in the jungle, and like my heart was palpitating and my toes were all crunched up. She regularly bathes in the river. And because it's so hot, she's naked as much as possible in the jungle.
Yeah.
I was just like, no. This is exactly the kind of book I want for Strong Sense of Place. It took me somewhere I will most likely never go in real life. And it described it so vividly, I could see and feel every detail in my imagination. If you want to know what it's like to live in the rainforest and watch a girl who is definitely a fish out of water find her way, this is the book for you. It's called Seducing the Spirits by Louise Young.
Book 2.
My first book is Panama Fever, the epic story of the building of the Panama Canal by Matthew Parker. In 1513, a Spanish explorer, Vasco Núñez de Balboa, led a team across the Panamanian Isthmus. And at one point in that trip, he climbed a hill, and if he looked one way, Balboa could see the Pacific Ocean, and if he looked the other, the Atlantic Ocean. And I'm guessing that on a clear day from the top of a hill in the middle of Panama, you feel like you could touch the two.
Sure.
They're right there.
Yeah.
Right? How hard could it possibly be to connect these two things?
Right.
Right? And then for 400 years, we should build a canal across Panama was easy to say.
Sure.
Benjamin Franklin was a proponent, like to give you some sense of, of that. It sounds like a good idea. And the benefits are so obvious, right? Ships can go right through and they won't have to take that nasty, dangerous trip down to South America. Every single ship would save a 2-month journey. Think of the trade and the military advantages, and we're going to make so much money. So much money.
And it's right there.
And it's right there. What could possibly stop us? So here's an incomplete list of 5 things that made building the canal challenging. So first, there's the land itself. Over the 60 miles of canal, there were jungles and mountains and swamps. It is one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. To this day, you can't drive straight from Alaska to Argentina. And the reason you can't is because of these 60 miles in Panama.
Right.
There's a spot called the Darien Gap. We've mentioned that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
In the last century, we have built roads in dangerous, out-of-the-way places, but not Panama. Not there, right? The canal engineers had to split the continental divide. They had to bring down a mountain to install the canal. 2, we've mentioned a little bit of this, but there's the local wildlife. That part of the world is home to jaguars and venomous snakes and caiman, who are alligator adjacent, and bugs that like to burrow into human flesh to lay their eggs.
I don't like the idea of burrowing bugs.
Yes. Strong no.
I am a fan of caimans, though.
Okay. All of those animals will happily eat you. All of them.
Or at least take a good chomp.
Yeah. But the most dangerous animal is the mosquito. So first, there are dense swarms of them, which just know from the top. Like, it makes me crazy if there's one in the bedroom with me.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine a foggy cloud of mosquito. But more importantly to human life, they carry yellow fever.
Mm-hmm.
So yellow fever shuts down your organs, particularly your liver, which gives you a yellow color, hence the name. It is so dangerous that in 1665, yellow fever hit a group of 1,500 soldiers on an island in the Caribbean. And a month later, there were 89 survivors.
Wow.
Yeah. Those poor guys.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 350 years ago, and we still don't have a cure. The medical recommendation is don't get yellow fever. 3, so for 8 months of the year, there's almost continual rain. It is one of the wettest places on Earth. Sometimes they get 2 inches of rain in an hour. As a result, landslides are common.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got industrial machinery, it's now in the river.
Right.
4, where are you going to find people who want to work in Panama? Right? It wasn't a secret that this was life-threatening, back-breaking work. How are you going to attract people? How are you going to keep them safe and healthy? How are you going to keep morale up?
In my next book, I'm going to talk a little bit about how you get people to do that.
Yeah. And then 5, there's the politics. Everybody knows that when you finish that canal, there's going to be money.
Mm-hmm.
So where's mine? And then local politics, right? Maybe we don't want your dumb canal cutting through our lush jungle. And what if it jacks up the water supply? And all of that is before you get to the relatively modern problems of environmental impact and cross-contamination of species. And there were 3 attempts by Europeans to control trade in Panama. The Scots tried to colonize there at the beginning of the 18th century. That went so poorly that it wiped out the Scottish economy.
Oh my gosh.
And led in part to them merging into Great Britain.
Wow.
Yeah. The French gave it a go in the 1800s, the late 1800s. We had just built the Suez Canal. That was 120 miles. How hard can the Panama Canal be? It's only 60 miles. That's half of what we did in Egypt. Their effort ended in mismanagement and scandal and ruin, and 20,000 workers died before they pulled out of that project 8 years later.
Terrible.
Yeah. And then finally, the U.S. effort started in 1904. Along with sort of the usual business, the U.S. government got involved in liberating Panama from Colombia, as you mentioned. Depending on what side you were on there, the word liberating might be doing a lot of work. And then for many decades, the U.S. governed the canal zone, just that thin strip. And the relationship between the U.S. and Panama shaped the economics and politics of Central America to this day.
Mm-hmm.
I bring all of this up to say that the canal story is a really good story.
Yeah.
There is a lot to talk about. A lot of interesting stuff happened, and it still reverberates today. Panama Fever is a book about the drama of building the Panama Canal, and there's plenty to go around. The author is British. I think the UK title of this book is better. The UK title is Hell's Gorge.
Amazing.
The battle to build the Panama Canal, which makes it sound more like a war story or a thriller, and it is, right? And the book, I think, intentionally walked me back and forth between thinking, it is truly astonishing that this ever got done. This is a monumental piece of engineering, and just hats off to all the people who were involved in this.
Right.
And that's on one side. And then on the other, it's just like, why men? What ego? What pride to think that this was a good idea.
Yeah.
Something to do.
We will bend the earth to our will.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a great story. It's told well. It's only about 350 pages. And for me, it was just solidly engaging throughout. This is Panama Fever, the epic story of the building of the Panama Canal by Matthew Parker.
Here's book 3.
My second recommendation would make a really good buddy read with Panama Fever. It's Silver People, Voices from the Panama Canal by Margarita Engel. It's a YA historical novel told in verse. So if your book was an adventure story, this is a quieter version that really focuses on the people who build the canal. It's pretty short. You can read it in about an hour.
Oh, wow.
But what it lacks in length, it more than makes up for in storytelling heft. The chapters alternate points of view, and you meet a handful of people who worked on building the canal. Immigrants who slept en masse in barracks and did just back-breaking labor.
Yeah.
American overseers who at best are more concerned about progress than people, and at worst are racists.
Yeah, I didn't mention the racism of the early 1900s was
I'll be covering that.
dense.
Yes. There's an artist, an anarchist, a geologist from Puerto Rico, a laborer from Jamaica, and a local girl who sells herbs. These are all the people we meet. Some real historical figures also make an appearance, including Theodore Roosevelt, a travel writer named Harry Frank, and a handful of American engineers who oversaw the building. The author, Margarita Engel, is a Newbery Honor winner and was the Young People's Poet Laureate. She is really good at sketching vivid characters with just a few lines of verse. The story mainly revolves around a 14-year-old Cuban boy named Mateo. These are his first words. Fear is a fierce wind that sends me reeling down to the seashore where I beg for work, any work at all, any escape, to carry me far from my father's furious fists. Sailor, fisherman, lobster trapper, I'm willing to take any job that floats me away from home.
That poor kid.
That answers your question about who you get to build a canal in dangerous circumstances.
Yeah.
He lies about his age to the American recruiters, and he sets out on a perilous adventure that includes a treacherous 3-day sea voyage, extreme hunger, language barriers, homesickness, and first love. Workers for the canal in real life were recruited from 100 countries around the world. When Mateo's ship arrives in Panama, the workers are ordered to line up according to the country that they're from. And then Mateo says this: each work crew is a different shade of light or dark, but when the foreman orders us to stand still while we're measured for our coffins, dark and light faces all look equally shocked. That's true, by the way.
Yeah, I read that as well.
So many men died building the canal. The estimate is between 12,000 and 25,000, depending on who you ask and which figures they're using from when.
And whether or not they were counting brown people. That was a big, yeah.
So many men died doing that job that when they arrived, they really were pulled aside and measured for coffins.
Yeah.
So that little logistical problem was taken care of.
Yeah.
Later in this book, Mateo learns that he and his fellow workers have also been divided into gold and silver. The American and Northern Europeans are gold. The olive and brown-skinned men are silver. They live segregated lives with different jobs, different rules, different treatment, and different pay. The silver people make half the hourly of gold.
Wow.
And that discriminatory payroll system lasted until 1955.
Wow.
The Silvermen, including Mateo and his friends, sleep in train cars converted into barracks, 12 men to a car. And their accommodations look nothing like the photos the recruiters showed them.
Right.
They saw pictures of nice houses with dining rooms and tables draped with tablecloths. That's where the gold people live.
Yeah.
The silver people eat their dinner outside, and it's described as a meal of mushy potatoes and stringy meat, which they're all grateful for because they are ravenous.
Yeah, because they're doing backbreaking work all day.
And the work is dull and dangerous at the same time. They dig and carry, manually moving train tracks, cutting back trees, and hauling rock to create what they call the serpent cut, the gash that will eventually become the canal.
Yeah.
And this is amid all of the rainforest dangers that we've already talked about. You didn't mention the enormous cockroaches.
I did not.
There's also malaria and cholera.
Yep.
And you did talk about the landslides. The landslide plays a major role in this story. One verse says that when the men heard the eerie howls of the monkeys in the trees, they howled right along with them. And as the indignities of their lives pile up, the workers' anguish turns into anger, and the situation in the jungle gets even more dangerous. I don't want to spoil it by being more specific than that, but there is let's call it a brouhaha.
Okay.
It's not all grim, though, in this story. Eventually, Mateo meets Anita. She's a local girl who has a very bright, positive, indomitable spirit. One of her poems says, "I know I'm too young to really flirt, but sometimes I do enjoy talking to the Cubano boy instead of working." In addition to her adding much needed female energy to the story, because it's all about the men working on the canal, she also brings the perspective of the locals. Their lives were eventually invaded by men from all over the world.
And what kind of men, too, right? This is not attracting the best and brightest.
Yeah. Some of the characters in this book have integrity. Some of them do not.
Yeah.
There are also passages told from nature's point of view. So some of them are whimsical. Some of them are very melancholy. We hear from the glass frogs. They like to sing. And the blue morpho butterflies, who talk about how they soar and dodge to get away from the birds. The trees talk about how they're solidly rooted in the ground. And a three-toed sloth says, "Time is my friend. I can wait for weeks." The verses from a tree viper and a jaguar are particularly clever and very good, but I don't want to ruin the fun, so you'll have to read it for yourself. One of the things I really enjoyed about this book is that it creates vivid snapshots with just a few words and then leaves room for your imagination to fill in the rest. So it's like the power is coming from the spaces. This is a coming-of-age story, a history lesson, an immigrant story, an adventure tale, a workplace drama, all packed into a small, super concentrated package. It's great on its own. It would make a very good companion to any of the other books in this episode. It's Silver People, Voices from the Panama Canal by Margarita Engel.
This is book 4.
My second book is Born to be Hanged, the epic story of the gentlemen pirates who raided the South Seas, rescued a princess, and stole a fortune, by Keith Thompson.
That is an intense title.
Yeah, subtitles keep getting longer and longer these days.
It feels very Victorian.
As you may have gathered from the title, this is a non-fiction pirate story. It starts in 1680 when a bunch of pirates, mostly English, are approached by the leader of a tribe from the Darien province in Panama. He tells the pirates that the Spanish colonizers have kidnapped his granddaughter, his beautiful granddaughter, the light of his life, and he says that he will lead the men through the jungles of Panama to the Spanish garrison. They're in a small fort next to a gold mine, and together the pirates and the tribe will take the fort and rescue the girl. The grandfather and his men will keep the girl, and the pirates can have all the gold in the camp.
That sounds like a good deal.
Yeah. There is estimated to be between 18 and 22,000 pounds of gold.
I would trek through the jungle for that much gold.
Yeah.
Plus, you get to save the princess.
Right. That is enough gold so that every man in the company, there's 366 of them, would be set for life, right? They could each buy a plantation or a 200-ton Dutch ship, and they would still have half the gold left. So they agree to do it. And there's our start. The book tells the story of the pirates through this adventure and its fallout over the next 2 years. Thompson follows them all over Central and South America through raids and treasure hunts and parlays with the colonies and the local tribes. So the pirates grabbed me, but how the story was told kept me coming back. The book has a very modern vibe. It just came out in 2022, and the author had previously written some thrillers. So he's got that going for him. He knows how to put together an action scene that comes across. But he's also telling history like a storyteller. The pirates have names and character. They're motivated. One of the things that helps Thompson is that 7 of the pirates kept journals that we still have.
Whoa, cool.
Yeah. So we know why the pirate Basil Ringnose is in Panama in the first place.
Basil Ringnose?
Yes.
Hold up.
Yeah. Yep. And these characters have agency. So I'm going to read you a paragraph. This is from immediately after the chief offers the pirates the job. You should know that the Santa Maria expedition is the one where the pirates go rescue the kidnapped princess. Basil Ringnose now had 3 choices. First, he could join the Santa Maria expedition. Second, he could opt out in favor of a saner venture. It would be only a matter of time before he caught on with another of the buccaneer crews that routinely stopped in the San Blas Islands for provisions and ship maintenance. Third was the sensible option, the one that took into account his nascent awareness of this band of buccaneers' utter disregard for risk, perhaps even a pathological affinity for danger. He could write off his brief involvement with them and return home to London. Although he frequently committed hundreds of words at a time to his journal, he wrote nothing about his decision. That was also typical of him. He was his own least favorite topic. Among the most intimate personal revelations in his journal were that he had been to Calais once, that he could speak Latin, and that he liked strawberries.
Oh my gosh, that is such a sweet detail.
I know. I'd love this kind of history, right? Tell me about the pirate who likes strawberries.
And speaks Latin.
Yeah. And it just makes it like so much easier to visualize what they're doing and how high the stakes are for these men. When I know the bit about the strawberries, now I'm worried that he's going to get shot or drown or find himself eaten by an anaconda. Before the strawberries, another pirate. After the strawberries, character. And there's a lot of that here. We learned that one of the pirates, William Dampier, took notes that would eventually be credited in the Oxford English Dictionary. He would introduce more than 1,000 words into English, including avocado, barbecue, and cashew.
Jeez, that's so cool.
Yeah. He's also the first Englishman to describe the effects of smoking marijuana. Quote, some it keeps sleepy, some merry, some putting them into a laughing fit, and others it makes mad. The author, Thompson, brings the whole pirate subculture into light. He writes about how they were an early form of democracy, voting on almost everything. He tells us that pirates never wore boots, contrary to popular culture.
What did they wear on their feet?
Sandals or nothing.
Sandals aren't tough.
He talks about how there was a form of worker compensation. So, for instance, if you lost your right arm, you were entitled to 600 pieces of eight. And that was part of something called the custom of the coast. This is exactly the kind of thing I enjoy reading. It's history written on a human scale. That it's about pirates just made me enjoy it all the more. If you want more swashbuckling in your life, you might enjoy this. It's Born to be Hanged, the epic story of the gentlemen pirates who raided the South Seas, Rescued a Princess, and Stole a Fortune by Keith Thompson.
And now book 5.
My final recommendation is The World in Half. The author Cristina Henriquez has made a career of writing books about or set in Panama, and to great acclaim. Her novel, The Book of Unknown Americans, from 2014, was named a notable book of the year by the New York Times, the Washington Post, Oprah, and the Daily Beast, among others. Yeah. She also wrote a short story collection called Come Together, Fall Apart. I read a few of those, and they are very good. Her most recent novel was a huge hit when it came out this past March. It's called The Great Divide. It's a historical novel about the building of the Panama Canal.
I felt like when I was looking up books in Panama, she was like half of the recommendations. Yeah. And it took me a minute to realize that like all 6 of these books were written by the same person.
Yeah. There's one awesome female author getting the stories of Panama out in the world.
Yeah.
After much deliberation, I chose her first novel, The World in Half, because it combines a family mystery with a travelogue. Here's the setup. Mira Flores is a college student in Chicago studying earth sciences, and her whole life it's been just her and her mom. Mira is the result of a love affair her mom had back in the day in Panama when she was married to another man. Fun fact, Mira is named for the Mira Flores lock on the Panama Canal.
Oh, all right.
When Mira's mom learned that she was pregnant, she broke off the affair, even though she loved him, and returned to the U.S. Mira was born, and her bio father was never in the picture. The family lore is that her dad didn't want to be part of their lives. But Mira's in college now. Her mom has gotten very ill. And Mira finds a stash of letters from her birth father that tells a completely different story.
Oh.
He loved her mother. He wanted to be her father, and he was devastated by this lost love.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah. So, Mira decides to secretly go to Panama to find her father.
Yeah.
She's going to get the answers to the questions that have plagued her whole life and maybe put her family back together. This is one of my favorite literary tropes. An impassioned trip to the homeland kicked off by a letter or some other MacGuffin. Yes, please. Also, bonus points awarded if the main character goes off kind of half-cocked with no real plan for how this whole adventure thing is going to work.
Yeah.
I love it.
So she gets to Panama. They hug at the airport. End of scene. End of book. Everybody lives happily ever after.
Yep, that's it. She takes herself off to Panama City.
Yeah.
And it's not long before she strikes up a friendship with a charming, mischievous young man named Danilo, who joins her investigation. And the whole time you're kind of like, is he a good guy? He's being really helpful, but it's a little suspicious how easily that happened. What's going on?
Yeah.
As the two follow kind of nebulous leads, Danilo shows her around Panama. And when they finally learn the truth about her dad, it raises more questions and feelings than she could ever have imagined. Such good stuff.
So was mom motivated to keep this guy out of their lives?
I'm not going to tell you that. You have to read the book.
All right.
But I will tell you the things that I loved. First, Mira is an excellent heroine. She's intelligent and thoughtful, but she's also a little hot-headed. The story is told in first person, so you get to hang out in her head, which is very enjoyable. And she weaves passages about geology into her story that draw parallels between the volatility of how the earth behaves and human emotions. I want to read you an example.
All right.
There are at least 1,500 active volcanoes in the world. There are dozens of variations: shield volcanoes, composite volcanoes, ice volcanoes, mud volcanoes, submarine volcanoes, subglacial volcanoes, supervolcanoes, and on and on. Some geologists dedicate their entire lives to studying them. But for the average citizen, the most interesting thing about a volcano is in the story of its eruption. People are fascinated by the idea of a fiery swell building underneath the surface of the earth for millions of years, only to one day tear through the crust, flaring it open like a bullet shot through the skin of a peach. They imagine the restless lava disgorged into the air like a heavy and tired geyser, as if all the fury and energy amassed within the earth can't be stopped. There's something about the process of a volcanic eruption that always strikes me as both beautiful and sad. It's the pain of the earth bubbling up through the surface and ripping it apart. It's the earth's ineluctable heartbreak.
That's some fine writing there.
There are just a handful of those passages throughout the book, but I love the way it drew parallels between the things that she studies and the things that are important to her intellectually, side by side with these big emotional changes she's going through. I also enjoyed seeing Panama through her eyes. She has the noticing skills of a first-time visitor. In between following the bits of info that they find about her dad, she and Danilo go to places she's read about in her guidebook. Because she is a book nerd, she has read everything she needs to before she goes. They visit the old town. They go to the Miraflores Visitors Center on the canal. They spend time at Mi Pueblito, which is the Panama City version of colonial Williamsburg. They take a ferry to Toboga Island, which has very dreamy beaches. You could practically use their adventures as an itinerary for spending a few days in Panama City.
I feel like that'd be a solid idea.
It's a nice mix of tourist attractions and locals only kind of stuff. This book could easily have fallen into a Hallmark movie trap. As you mentioned, Mira and Danilo have a sweet romance. She finds her father. Everyone lives happily ever after. This is so much better than that. The relationships and emotional waves are more complex. The relationships did not go the way I thought they were going to. And it just kind of elevated the whole experience. Cristina Henriquez is really good at what she's doing. This is a satisfying exploration of family and friendship with a vivid setting in Panama. It's The World in Half by Cristina Henriquez.
Those are 5 books we love set in Panama. Visit our show notes at strongsenseofplace.com for links and details. We will have sloth videos. We'll tell you more about Richard Halliburton and his amazing life. We'll have a video of how the canal works from the perspective of a ship.
And I'll link to more information about visiting the indigenous village, just in case you want to have your own jungle adventure.
Mel, where are we headed for our next episode?
We're launching a formal investigation into detective agencies.
Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Can you actually change your personality if you want to? How does peer pressure work, and why is it so powerful? Should you ever really trust your gut when you make a big decision? These are just a few of the topics we've recently covered on my podcast, Something You Should Know. I'm the host, Mike Carruthers, and each episode of Something You Should Know covers multiple topics that are likely relevant to you. You'll discover things you can use in your life today, right now, like how to have a great conversation, how to be more courageous, the anatomy of the perfect apology, and much, much more. To date, there are over 1,000 episodes of Something You Should Know, and we've gotten over 4,000 mostly 5-star reviews. I invite you to check out Something You Should Know. Look for the bright yellow light bulb on the blue background. Something You Should Know, wherever you listen to podcasts.